Let me show you a very interesting thing in JavaScript. Here I have declared a variable Thor hammer, as you can see. Now I am going to console log that before the declaration, and let's see what happens. So console log Thor hammer. See, I have console logged it. Basically, I have accessed the variable before even defining the variable. Is it not gonna show error? It is supposed to show error, of course. Let's see what happens. What? It didn't show any error. As you can see here, it showed undefined. This is not error, of course. Why did it show undefined? And why didn't it show error? Okay, let's try this with function. We shall call a function before it was defined. And let's see what does it do. So let me remove this. So let me create a function. Let's just name it func1. And here we shall just console log hello. Okay, it's a very simple function. And we shall call it before it was defined. It is supposed to show error. Let's see what happens. What? It called the function and it is giving output hello. I mean, this is console logging hello and I am calling this function before even defining this function. How come is this possible? This is possible in JavaScript. Let's understand what is variable hoisting and function hoisting. So let's see the variable first, then we will see the function. So let's console log this here after this variable definition. Okay, and let's see the output. So it gave undefined for this one, for this console log, and for this console log, it gave this output hammer. Okay, now let's understand why did it give undefined here rather than error. So what is happening basically, anywhere you declare a variable in JavaScript, JavaScript hoists that variable at the top of its scope. What is hoisting? Hoisting means pulling something up. So it will pull it up at the top of its scope. Okay. So it will actually bring this Thor hammer variable at the top and it will initialize it with undefined. This is what is actually happening under the hood. Okay. So that is why it is giving undefined. Now see, it makes proper sense. It is giving undefined here, basically this output, because it is undefined here at the top. And then this value is set and this is giving this hammer. Now it seems very natural. This is supposed to happen because this variable is actually declared here at the top. It is done under the hood by the JavaScript engine. So this is called basically variable hoisting. Same happens with the function. Let's see that with the function. So in case of function, even though we declared this function here, it will be actually hoisted at the top of its scope. It will be here. That is why when we call the function is already there. So what will happen basically, this function will be at the top. Okay, and this is done automatically by the JavaScript. That is why it is calling this function. But isn't it weird? Sometimes it will give output that is mysterious to us, that we don't know why actually that output was given. Okay, so the programming should be always predictable, but it seems unpredictable. But it is actually not unpredictable. Once you understand the execution context, there is memory phase or loading phase or initialization phase, and then the execution phase. So once you understand that, it will be 100% clear to you and it will not remain mysterious to you why is it behaving like this. Okay, so we'll get into that in terms of execution context, how it is working. But before that, I want to show you one more interesting thing here. What if we use a function expression like this? Here, I actually used a function expression. Basically, I declared a variable with var. So this function will actually point this function. Okay. So if we call this function at the top of it, now what will happen? Let's see what does it do. See, here it gave an error. Function1 is not a function. Why? Because this is now a variable, this func1. So it will be hoisted at the top, and we already saw that it will be actually undefined as it is a variable. So by the time this function1 is called, it is not pointing to any function, it is just undefined. That is why it is saying that function1 is not a function. I mean, it is just behaving like a variable. Now let's get into the execution context, what is actually happening under the hood. Well, to explain hoisting, we shall execute this piece of code line by line and we will see how the hoisting actually works. So let's start that. And this is our global scope, remember? So this is our global, this is our memory, basically our context. And remember, there are basically two phases in JavaScript while execution is happening. One is memory phase, or this is also called loading phase, or this is also called initialization phase. Okay. After this phase, the execution phase will start. So now the memory phase will start. So let's write the memory phase. In the memory phase, what will happen basically, it will only look into the variable declaration and the function definition, and it will set this in the memory. So here, when this line will be executed, this is in the global. So remember, in the call state, the global will be there. Okay. So the execution will start in the global. And here in this line, it will not do anything in the memory phase. So it will come to this line. And here we have a variable declaration of Thor hammer. And this will be set in the memory. So Thor hammer will be there. And initially it will be undefined and it will be automatically set by the JavaScript. So the execution will move to the next line and here it will not do anything. So it will come to the next line and there is a function definition. Okay, so it will save this function, this func1 in the memory. And this function basically will point to this function 1. Okay, so the execution will move here. There is no more code. So the memory phase is done. Now the execution phase will start. Now in the execution phase, it is trying to console log this Thor hammer. So it will access this variable and it will look into this variable here in the memory. And there is the variable and the value is undefined. So it will console log undefined here. Now you can understand why it is console logging undefined here in this line. Okay, so this is our log and it console logged undefined here. Now it will come to the next line and here it basically set this hammer in this variable. So here this undefined will be removed and this hammer will be set. So this hammer will be set here. Okay. Now the execution will move to the next line and here it is calling this function function1. So it will be in the call stack first. So the execution will start and it will look into the memory for the function1. Is there any function1 here? And there we have it. So this will be executed. So pointer will come here and it is trying to console log hello and in the log it will just console log hello. Now you can see because of the memory phase and the execution phase, this is happening. Basically, we already have the variables in the memory and the functions in the memory to execute. Even though this function is called before the definition, it is already in the memory because of the memory phase. In the memory phase, it was set in the memory already. That is why it got it and it executed it. So now I hope it is 100% clear to you how this is actually working, why the hoisting happens. So simply hoisting happens because of two phases. One is memory phase, one is execution phase. Now let's see one more interesting thing. What if we declare the variable with let and constant? Here we declare the variable with var, you can see. Okay, but what if we used let and constant? Let's see that. Okay, so here we have declared this variable with var. Let's declare this with let. Okay, that sounds funny. Let's declare with let. All right, so we have declared this with let and now we shall run this and we will see what output it gives. See, it gave this error, basically this reference error. This has been accessed before initialization. So when you declare a variable with let, before the initialization or before the declaration, this area, it is called TDZ, Temporal Dead Zone. So what does it mean? It means in this area, this variable is not accessible. All right. Now the question is, if this is not accessible here before the declaration, isn't this variable hosted at the top during the memory phase? Of course it is hosted. This variable is hosted at the top, but we cannot access it because this is a temporal dead zone area. So any variable that we declare with constant and let, the area before the declaration of the variable is a temporal dead zone. We cannot access that there. So I always recommend to use let and constant for declaring variables because it gives a predictable behavior. I hope that's clear. Well, now let's see the function scope and the block scope. So for that, let's create a function, func, and there we shall declare two variables basically, one with var, let's say it's num10, and another with let. Okay, and that will be id is equal 1. Now let's try to console log them outside the function. So it will be num and let's console log id. Okay, now let's run it and let's see. What do you think? What will happen? Will it give error? Will it give these values or will it give just undefined? Let's see it. Let's run it. And here we can see that it gave the output num is not defined. Basically in this line number 12. So which is basically this line number 12 console log num. So it could not access num. And why is that? Because var is function scoped and let is block scoped. And it is both a function and a block. What is a block? Block is basically anything inside a curly braces. Okay, so there is this curly braces, so it is also a block and it is also a function. So both will be hosted at the top of the function. It will not go beyond this. So these variables will always reside in this function. That is why we can never access them outside that function. Okay, so that is why it is giving this error. So here it gave the error only for the num because here the application broke. It was error. This line did not even execute. So let's check that. Let's just comment this out and let's run it. See, now it is giving id is not defined. Okay, basically this one. So that is function scoped. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Now let's just make it a block. What is a block? Block is basically this curly braces. Okay, now let's remove the comment and let's run it and let's see what happens. Okay, here you can see that it gave the output 10 and also an error. ID is not defined. So for this line, it gave this error, and for this line, it gave this output. Okay, so num is 10. So see, this num variable which has been declared with var, we can access this outside this block. Why? Because var is function scoped. If it is inside a block, it will go beyond the block. Okay, so here it will be actually hoisted var num is equal undefined. This is what will happen. And then it will execute this line. It will set this value 10 and it will console log this 10 here, basically this num. All right. But this ID is not accessible because ID has been declared with let and it will be hoisted at the top of the block. It is block scope. All right. So this is how basically it works. And we do not use block like this. Okay, we basically use if condition and then this block or for loop. So this way we use block. So I hope the hosting in JavaScript is 100% clear to you. You have understood it deeply, how it actually works. And if you want to study more, I'll give you the ambient documentation link in the description. Please check that out and take care of your health. Keep growing your knowledge, keep applying your knowledge.